Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where each week we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. I'm a summer camp director, writer, and speaker, and I've had the privilege of working with thousands of children, teenagers, young adult counselors, and parents over the past 3 decades. My husband, Steve, and I are raising 5 kids who currently range in age from 15 to 25. So my interest in raising kind, optimistic, self-reliant kids who become thriving adults is personal as well as professional. For this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be sharing my 12 One Simple Thing tips that I shared this year on my emails and on Facebook Live videos starting on January 1st and on the 1st of every month since. You can find more detail about each of these tips on my website if you search for One Simple Thing. The reason I decided to start this series was because I really think that sometimes we make our families and this whole parenting thing too complicated when there's some very simple things we can do to just create a little more happiness and connection in our homes. If you've followed me for a while, you know that many of the things that I share are tips and strategies that camp counselors use at summer camp to help bring the kids together and create really fun communities at camp. So I thought it would be fun to do a recap of the 12 simple things that I shared this year. And for those of you who never saw my emails or the Facebook Lives, now you don't even need to look for them because all of the tips will be right here in this episode of the podcast. Tip number 1 is daily family sharing. A very easy way to just create some more connection in your family is to have some habit that you do every day. And it can be something as simple as everybody sharing one thing that happened to them today. It can be what a lot of people do, sharing a high of the day and a low of the day. The sharing can take place at dinner time, at bedtime, over breakfast. Really, you can create whatever tradition works best for your family. But it's just so important to make sure that in our busy family lives, we take a little time just to check in with each other at least once a day. So that was the first tip of the year that I shared in January, and it was daily family sharing. The second tip is calm the morning chaos. And the reason I shared this tip is because I did a survey last year and I asked parents what parts of the day were most stressful, most chaotic in their families, and where they could use the most help. And really by a landslide, what many people said was the hardest time of day was the morning. And so my friend Sarah and I sat down and had a talk and shared various strategies for calming the morning chaos. So I'll share a few of the highlight ones here. And if you want even more tips, you might want to go back and watch our whole Facebook Live episode. Just look at my website and check out the One Simple Thing for February. I guess the first thing for this tip is just to decide if you really need it. If your mornings are fairly peaceful and don't create more stress or unhappiness in your family, then it's not something that you need to even worry about. But for many families where the morning doesn't feel like a great way to start the day, there are just some simple things that you might want to try to just calm everything down just a bit. Starting at just kind of the most basic level, be sure that you greet everybody in your family. So, even though people might be kind of grouchy and disheveled or whatever in the morning, just at least give everybody a smile, say good morning, ask how they slept. Just that basic, friendly, loving greeting is just so important when, people might be rushing around and that kind of thing. Another very simple way to calm the morning chaos is just to give yourself and everyone else more time than you think you need to get whatever you need to get done. It's so much better to be ready to go and ahead of time rather than grabbing things and kind of scrambling around at the last minute. That kind of creates more stress. For many of us, if mornings are not our best time of day, it's best if we can prep most things the evening before. So, for a lot of kids, laying out their outfit, having their backpack all the way packed up and just sitting by the door, getting their lunch ready, any forms that school needs to get back, just all that stuff. It seems a lot easier just to kind of get it all packed up and ready to go the night before so that you have the fewest things you need to get done in the morning itself. I also think sometimes you just have to kind of be a little flexible about what you expect the morning to be and maybe make some changes just to make it simpler for your family. I know a family that doesn't even try to have the kids sit down to breakfast and they all just have kind of a grab and go breakfast in the car on the way to school. And you know what? That's fine. If that gives kids and everybody a little more sleep and just takes away, one 10 to 15-minute activity in the morning, then that might work for your family too. It's really up to you to decide what are the things that you really want to happen in the morning versus what are the things that really have to happen. The kids have to get out the door to school, you have to get out the door to work. So some things just have to happen. So how can you make those few things just a little less stressful by maybe streamlining, not doing as much, not having such high standards for what people need to eat for breakfast or how people's hair needs to look. All those little details that they are details and in the big picture of life, really not going to have such a big impact. Whereas just having the memory of mornings being fun, relaxed, less chaotic is a nice gift we can give our kids. I've been reading a lot this year about habits and routines and how important they are just for both well being and productivity. And so I think I've made my own morning routine just separate from the kids, just to really outline for me what a perfect morning would look like. Because sometimes if we don't really have a habit and a system in place, things won't happen. So for me, just as an example, I tend to, if I don't get the exercise done really first thing or very early in my day, it tends not to happen. And then it's kind of one of those things that hangs over me all day, and I'm trying to figure out when am I going to get this exercise done. So for me, I've figured out that I really can't start checking email or doing anything like that until after I've gotten my exercise. And I think with kids, it's kind of the same way. And in the morning with families, sometimes, we get into the habit of, oh, I'll just, quickly check my email over here. And then, you lose track of time. And then, oh my gosh, all of a sudden you've got to walk the dog and do five things right before running out the door. At least that's what happens to me. So if for yourself, you just plot out kind of your perfect morning routine and then figure out like what that means for everybody else in your family, that could be a starting point. Really at the start of a new year is a good time to regroup, and maybe the whole family can talk about how you guys could make mornings just better for 2019. So that's just one idea. I think that it really does make for a happier family if there's a time of day that you can just make a little bit better. So if there's a time of day, whether it's morning or the evening or whatever, that is just a source of stress in your family, maybe just taking a look at that one time of day and seeing what little changes you can make could really make a big difference in sort of the happiness level of your family and how calm your home feels. Tip number 3 is discover your authentic self. And this is one of my topics that I find myself talking with people a lot about. I think as parents, oftentimes we get so caught up in our kids and just the busyness of family life and our work that we really can easily lose track of sort of our authentic self and the hobbies and interests and things that really kind of, give us some spark and make us feel good. And it's really common, and I think especially when our kids are just in, during the school years when they are so busy and we're busy moving them around, figuring out what's going on with them, helping them manage their lives, while also managing our own. There's a lot going on. So it's hard to, justify, oh, this instrument that I love to play, I'm gonna practice every day for 20 minutes. So a lot of times things that we really enjoy go by the wayside as a parent. And so for this tip, I really just want to hopefully encourage you to remember one of those things or a few of those things that you've always really enjoyed doing that maybe you've stopped doing because you don't feel like you have enough time to do it anymore. For our kids' well being, it's really good for them to see us as adults doing things we love and enjoy and not just kind of slogging through life. I've told many people, I think, in conversation that I think kids who are hesitant about growing up, often it's because they're looking at adults in their life and thinking, that doesn't look that fun. I'm not sure I want to do that. And so I think it's worth thinking about that it's definitely not selfish to remember to do the things that really make you feel happy. Because if you're doing those things and feeling happy, you'll be better for all the people around you, including your kids. So if you're not really sure what you really like to do because it's been so long since you've really been in that cool state of flow where you're just really enjoying yourself and could get lost and time goes by so fast. One trick is to think back to your early adolescence. A lot of times, hobbies that we discovered and started enjoying when we were 11, 12, 13 years old are things that we still might enjoy today. For me, there are a few things that really do resonate for me in that topic. When I was that age is when I first discovered photography. I used to love taking pictures of all my friends and, I gave a lot of photo gifts, and I still enjoy that today. Another thing was writing. I kept journals back then. And so my writing is still something that is really gets me into that flow state. So I would just encourage you to find those things that you really enjoy and just model for your kids what that looks like. A lot of kids are still searching for their things that they enjoy. And if we kind of show them what that looks like to be doing the things we like and practicing different crafts, or even if it's just spending time with friends and organizing a tea or a coffee or a book club or something like that, that if that gets you into flow, showing your kids that you do that kind of thing really is a great modeling for them. So yeah, that tip was to discover your authentic self, or maybe it's more like rediscover your authentic self. The fourth tip comes directly from camp, and it's called the one-on-one check-in. And this is something that I've shared before with parents that we do at camp. So, you can go through a day being even in the same house with people or in the same car and really not know how they're doing. And so to think about just dedicating just a couple minutes to each important person in your life, be it your spouse, your kids, maybe the coworkers you work most closely with, to take just a couple minutes to give them your full attention, look them in the eye, put down your phone, and just really find out what's going on and how they're doing. And you can decide what comes naturally to you, what kind of question to ask. But pretty much with kids, the best questions are open-ended ones. So, the question, how was your day at school? Kind of like kids will say fine or usually not have much response. But, you might want to say, tell me something good or fun that happened to you today. Or tell me something that I can do to make your evening a little better. You can just think about something that expresses caring, but also does check in with them a little bit. And I think if every parent just took just a couple minutes, and really it can be as short as 2 minutes or even less, to just make sure that you do that touch point every day. That's so important because otherwise, really, a lot of days, weeks, and months can go by, especially when our kids get to the teenage years and they don't seem as receptive, maybe to talking to us. So they might feel it might feel like they're pulling back, and you might feel like you want to stop reaching out. That's actually really the time that you need to be most persistent. So even if they don't really seem like they enjoy it, it's really important to persist at checking in and just doing that little touch base, caring touch point with a one-on-one every single day. All right, tip number 5, I called wows, but really it's just a compliment practice. And I think that, we all know science has shown that we're much more attuned to negative things. So we tend to see and point out oftentimes what's going wrong in a situation or with a person than what's going right. So if we can retrain ourselves to be more positive and to point out more of the positive things in our kids, that can really make for, first of all, them feeling better and feeling happier, but also just a whole better vibe in our homes. So wows are simply something we do at camp where basically people can write anything that they have noticed someone else do that was kind or good or helpful or brave, and they write it on a little wow pad, and we put them on a big bulletin board, and we read a few at our assembly and then give them to people in their mail. So maybe that's not a realistic practice at home, but at least you as a parent giving verbal wows to your kids can for sure be a regular and really important practice that can really up the positivity in your home. So I would just suggest trying it out, and maybe just try on a small scale. Just give one wow to each family member today. They can be something as simple as, I noticed you unloaded the dishwasher without being asked. Thanks for doing that. It doesn't have to be some massive, huge, important compliment. Really, it's just pointing out something positive that you've noticed in the person or seen them do, or anything at all that is positive about them. That's such a great way to just make everyone feel better. All right, we've reached the halfway point of my tips. This is tip number 6, and it was for June. And the tip was to have a summer theme. And I talked about how, oftentimes as parents, there's so many things that we want to teach our kids, and we start thinking, oh my gosh, I want to teach my kid to, focus more on kindness, or I want to teach them how to manage money. And I don't know about you, but I can often just get like overwhelmed with all these things that I want to share with my kids or teach them. So the concept of having a theme for either a season or a month, I think is a great idea, just as a way to just kind of feel less overwhelmed. So for example, if you're just thinking, I really want in our family us to focus more on volunteering and doing more kind of outreach or helping others, and have that be a theme for a certain season of the year or a month. And maybe it ends up lasting longer or becoming something that you want to keep doing. But if there's one thing or one character trait or practice that you really want to get going in your family, maybe just try doing it one at a time by picking a theme. It could be, you could pick a motto or a book or a movie that shows, something that you want to focus on, and make it sort of a fun thing that you can all contribute to and share ideas for. Tip number 7 is one of my favorites, and it is to focus on strengths. I've spent a lot of time in recent years researching and learning about how important it is for us to be more focused on our strengths and on our kids' strengths than on weaknesses. It is much better and more happiness producing to be working on building upon and using our strengths than on remediating weaknesses. Often in my talks with parents, I just give the example of, somebody who's getting a B in math. There's no need to get a tutor. They understand it well enough. And if they really enjoy math and want to do more of it, then that might be a reason to get a tutor. But if it's your child's least favorite subject and they really love to read or do art or do something else, I would recommend letting them just focus on the thing that they're really enjoying. So I have been a real proponent of focusing on strengths, and that especially goes with character strengths. At camp, we do an activity with our older campers, our junior counselors, where they do a strength survey. And it's an online survey that they do that comes up with 5 what we call signature strengths. And those are things like appreciation for beauty and kindness or courage, all these different character traits. And we also have them point out to each other what they've seen in each other before they've seen their official results. And it's really fun to see how it makes kids light up to hear about what other people are seeing in them as strengths. I think as parents, for whatever reason, we see in our kids oftentimes so much of ourselves. And sometimes even, sometimes our kids share our strengths. And sometimes our kids also share our areas for improvement, we'll just say. And sometimes that can trigger us a little. Like we see that our kid has the same issue that maybe we do, and it really kind of bugs us. And so we want to help them fix it or make it better. But that can end up making kids feel bad if we seem to be constantly kind of harping on things that they need to do differently. So focusing on strengths is just a simple way to definitely make everyone in the family feel a lot better and create some more happiness. A simple tip that I shared as tip number 8 is more of, less of, same of. This is an activity that I've done several times with work teams, but it also works just as an individual or in a family. And I've done it as myself as a way, instead of doing goals, just do a quick assessment of, okay, so what's going on in my life right now? What do I want more of in my life? What do I want less of in my life? And what do I want same of? And this practice is really good because it's also a gratitude practice, because you're thinking, okay, so same of, right now I really am liking that we're having plenty of time hanging out together. I want same of, the exercise that I'm doing. I want the same of checking in with my kids. Then, less of, it could be, I want less of, media distraction, social media time. I want less of, late night computer time or emailing. And then, more of, you can say, I want more of time with friends and coffee dates or something like that. So this activity of more of, less of, same of really works for any group. It's really great as a brainstorm. So an activity you could do with your family is to just say, hey, you know what? Let's just look at this year. What went really well? What do we want the same of for next year? What did we not really like as much? What do we want less of? And what do we want more of? And it just gives everybody a chance to think about and talk about just how things are going. Because, whether it's a work group, a family, a marriage, anything, there's always things that are going well. And there's always things that can be changed. And this is a great kind of defensive free kind of conversation that you can have that is a great way to share those ideas. Tip number 9 was one that I shared with my daughter, Gretchen. We called it the magic relationship ratio. So when you think about your interactions with everyone in your life, be it your kids, your spouse, your coworkers, there are some interactions that are just kind of neutral. They're not positive or negative. And then there are interactions that are really positive, like when they pay you a compliment or you laugh about something together. Those would be positive interactions. And then negative interactions would be, some kind of criticism or complaint or nagging. So you can kind of classify every interaction with other people as positive, negative, or neutral. And the magic relationship ratio just speaks to the idea that in any relationship, for it to be maintained and sustained at a positive level and bring good feelings to both people, we need to be aware of the ratio of our positive to negative interactions. Because, of course, there's always going to be things that are negative that we need to share or talk about, or, events that are going to happen. But we want to make sure that the positive interactions far outweigh those negative ones. So, the magic relationship ratio was discovered by John Gottman in his research. Really, it was pertaining to marriages, but it works for all relationships. And basically, he has found that it takes 5 positive interactions to counteract any one negative interaction. To keep our relationships with our kids really strong and connected, and I would say especially so during the teenage years, we need to really stay in tune with how many of our interactions with them are positive and work to be much more intentional about creating more positive interactions with them. So, a few of the previous tips that I shared really can help with this, especially the one-on-one, the daily check-in with them, and also wows and giving them some compliments, as well as focusing on strengths. All 3 of those previous tips could really help create more positive interactions where there might be kind of too many negative ones revolving around, homework, reminders, chores, etc. So I think it's really important to remember that, especially when our kids are feeling kind of at a low point, like maybe they're not feeling great about themselves anyway, that's when we really need to up our positive interactions with them, and it will really build and keep your relationship strong as well. Tip number 10 is a challenging one, and it is to come up with some unplugged family time. And like you, and probably most parents, I've really struggled with this. Our kids are very drawn to their devices, and that's where they connect with a lot of their friends. So it's hard to peel them away. So my latest strategy, especially with older kids, is to have them be part of the solution. So have them perhaps come up with the activities that they're interested in doing together that don't involve screens, and then participating as a family. For many families, these are outdoor type activities that they'll do together, like go for a bike ride or a hike or play tennis or basketball. Ping pong has been a fun family activity in our family, but really anything that you can do as a family together that's not surrounding your screens, because it's likely that you have plenty of activities that do involve screens, like maybe movie nights and that kind of thing. So figuring out unplugged family time, both maybe a fun activity every weekend that you do together, and also just regular unplugged time. So if you just make dinner time always a time that everybody's phones are in another room or put away, and the hour before bedtime is another really good time to just make it everybody be unplugged for a while. So just it really can increase both our own happiness and the happiness of our kids. And it can also improve our connection by encouraging more of our kind of face-to-face interactions. And I also think that getting unplugged also helps get us outdoors more. I've noticed that, especially when my kids were younger, if I said, okay, time to get off the screens, their default thing would be to go outside and do something more active. And so I think that it's good to just start these habits of unplugged family time. Leading right off of tip number 10 was tip number 11, which was to go outside. If that means walking out onto the front porch for just a few minutes, or going for a walk with the dog around the block, or whatever that looks like for you, going outside is a huge happiness booster for everybody. It makes us all feel better just to take some deep breaths, to either smell some fresh air or feel the sunshine on our face or look up at the stars. Whatever you can do to get outside a little bit more, that can really produce a huge boost for your family's happiness level. And I really encourage you to do so. The final tip that I shared this year, tip number 12, is my activity that I call 100 Family Memories. And this is something that my family does every December, and we really enjoy coming up with a list of 100 things that we remember from the year. And we've done this now since 2008. So we have this whole library of these legal pads full of lists that have everything ranging from really big events that happened, like people's graduations or getting a driver's license or getting wisdom teeth taken out, to really small events and also really funny events that happened. So it really has been a great way to just remember our year. And for our family, especially since many of the kids now are adults and live away from home, it's also a way for us to hear from each other person what their big events were or what their memories were from the year. And because you're trying to think of 100, that's so many that you get into some really obscure things towards the bottom. And sometimes those are the best things. So we do this list over a period of time. This year we'll be doing it over the holidays. And it's you kind of start the list and you get going and you can come up with like maybe 30 things right off the top of your heads, but then you kind of stagnate a bit. So you kind of set the list aside, or you keep the pad of paper out and people can add to it. Really, you can do it any way you'd like, but we find it to be a really fun year-end family activity. And I have dreams of one day taking all my lists and, putting together like photo books or scrapbooks or something that have, pictures from the events. Like for my family this year, a really huge event. It was actually the Christmas present that our kids got last year was going to a Taylor Swift concert. So they got the tickets for Christmas last year. We went in May on Mother's Day weekend, and I'm pretty sure based on everybody's schedules, it was our only weekend together the whole year, pretty much all of us in one place. And so it was a really fun family memory. So that'll probably top our list as one of our memorable events for the year, but there are many others that happened. And sometimes it's, you have to go back and look at photos, like go back through your phone and look back to what was happening in January, and you'll remember things that you've forgotten about. So I really recommend that activity. But if that's too much or too much of too much time or sounds too overwhelming, you can also just come up with 25 memories from the year. Or I have several other reflection type activities on my website that you can look up if there's other things that you're interested in doing. There's the reverse bucket list, which is a really fun way that instead of setting goals for the new year, you make a list of things that you actually did do over the past year. And it's a gratitude activity because it just reminds you that, maybe you're not exactly where you want to be, but you've come really far. We talk about focusing on the gain, not the gap. So, maybe you want to do something more next year, but you've done a little bit towards that goal this year. So maybe you're working on learning something that you wanted to learn, or you've been practicing something that you want to get better at. And all of these activities that you do, if you're doing them with your kids, it's really motivating because they see that even adults are still working on this stuff. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the podcast, which is my final episode of the year 2018. For those of you who have joined me on my Sunshine parenting journey over the past several years, I just want to say a huge thank you for listening to my podcasts, reading my blog posts, and sending emails and encouraging words. I really appreciate this community that we've built of people who are working together to raise a generation of kids who become thriving adults. I'm really excited for some things that I have coming up in 2019, starting with my Happy Campers interview series, which is going to start up in January. I'm going to be talking with camp directors from day camps and resident camps all around the United States, and we're going to be talking about the social and emotional skills that kids develop at camp and specific strategies these camps use to help kids grow. To learn more about the Camp Director interview series and the specific camps I'll be talking to, visit my website at sunshine-parenting.com. You'll also find there the detailed notes from this episode of the podcast by searching for episode 68. While you're there, I really encourage you to join my email list so that I can send you weekly posts and podcast episodes, as well as links to articles and other information that I find interesting and helpful in raising thriving kids. Finally, if you are a regular listener and you enjoy the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, I would truly appreciate it if you would take a moment to give me a rating and review on iTunes. That way, other people who listen to podcasts might be able to find Sunshine Parenting. I read and very much appreciate every single review that gets put in iTunes, including this one from TK in DC. Don't let the title fool you. This is about raising children pure and simple. Audrey brings together amazing experts and makes every guest feel like a friend. Run, don't walk to catch the episodes you may have missed. There is a treasure in each one. I'll be taking a break from the podcast and everything else for a few weeks, and the next episode will be back on Friday, January 11th. Until we're back together again, I'd like to wish you a wonderful holiday season and new year, and I hope that you have lots of times to connect and feel happy with your family. I'll leave you with one of my favorite quotes that I'm using as my motto for the next few weeks. It's by Anne Lamott. Almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you.
This podcast is a proud member of Parents on Demand, a network of high-quality shows for families just like yours. Download our free network app on Apple and Android and listen to your favorite episodes on the go.